Khamzat Chimaev just had the most dominant performance in UFC title fight history. You can hate how he did it however much you want. It makes sense. It was boring as hell. But having almost 25 minutes of control time against a champion who almost nobody had an answer to is unheard of. I thought this was going to be a great fight. I thought it was going to be a war. And it was everything but that. And credit to Khamzat Chimaev, because in the short time we saw on the feet, Dricus du Plessis was just piecing him up. So he understood the assignment. He took him down in the first 15 seconds of every single round and held him there. He just gave him some love taps on the head, a little bit of nudges to the body with his knee. He didn't do anything but that, but he got the round every single time. Is this fight a completely different story on the feet? Absolutely. Khamzat might have been knocked out if this stayed on the feet. But Dricus du Plessis had absolutely no answer for Khamzat's ground game. And to be quite frank with you guys, nobody at 185 has an answer for this. Caio Borralho and Fluffy were just like, I don't want anything to do with this. And then you saw RDR and he was like, just had the normal face that he always has on. But still, nobody at 185 has an answer to Khamzat Chimaev. I had this fight 50-45 Khamzat. I could see a 50-44. I just don't think he ever did enough damage to warrant a 10-8 round in any of the rounds, but I can understand it. And maybe the best chance at beating Khamzat is still DDP. He's seen Khamzat, he felt him. He said, and I quote, he was just a blanket. So maybe with improved ground game, DDP has a shot because Khamzat had nothing for him on the feet. And no matter how much I respect Khamzat for sticking to the plan and getting in and getting out of that octagon with the title, I was falling asleep in Wild Wing. I'm being so serious. I was falling asleep, which is shocking because the rest of this card was fantastic and had a lot of surprises. Let's take a look at this co-main because I thought Lerone Murphy was going to show Aaron Pico there's levels to this shit. But Aaron Pico came out, and I'm like, oh my god, this is Michael Chandler. He's so explosive. He's taking down Lerone Murphy. He's firing to the body. And then Lerone Murphy landed this one elbow that seemed to change the tide of the entire fight. And then shortly thereafter, a nasty spinning back elbow, which I was disgusted. I saw the spinning back elbow from Protest earlier in the night, and I saw this one landing right on Aaron Pico's temple and seeing his head hit off the mat. It was just, ugh. And then Lerone Murphy added insult to injury by just giving him a bit of a love tap right after. It was nasty. And after this, I think there's one fight for Lerone Murphy, and it's a title fight. He's undefeated at 17-0, came into this fight as the 6th ranked fighter at 145, destroyed the Bellator import, and then after the fight, Alexander Volkanovski said, see you in December, Lerone. So maybe that's the next fight at 145. I thought it would be the winner of Gene Silva and Diego Lopez. And maybe you just give Lerone Murphy Yair Rodriguez. But it seems to me that at 17-0, you're probably going to be a top 3 guy at 145 after this. I think you got to wait for a title shot, and that seems to be the fight. As much as Movsar Evloev deserves the title shot, I think it's way more appetizing for Alexander Volkanovski to face Lerone Murphy because although he had a nasty spinning back elbow, he's usually a decision guy. And, you know, when you're old like Volk and your chin's been tested a couple times, I think this is a more appetizing fight for him. But who knows? Maybe Lerone Murphy gets Yair Rodriguez, and I'm taking Lerone Murphy in that fight. On to the feature fight between Carlos Prates and Jeff the Stepping Stone Neal. Man, Carlos Prates looked way better in this than he did against Ian Gary. And I don't know if that's because he's fighting someone less dangerous in Jeff Neal, or maybe he just improved. He was so active on the feet. He was throwing against Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal was catching him. Prates was catching him. And then at the very end of the first round, a nasty spinning back elbow just put Jeff Neal out. It was a really close first round. I'm not going to lie. It was really close. I'd give it to Prates, but it was a close round. And originally, I thought this fight might have been called off a little bit too early. Jeff Neal's head hit the mat right as the bell went. But as the minutes went on and Jeff Neal was still receiving medical support, I was like, oh, yeah, that was the right call. I don't know who's next for Carlos Prates. Maybe it's MVP, who we'll get to. But what I will say is he looks way better at 170. And regardless of who's next up for Carlos Prates, he looked so good in the first round. He looked way more active than he did against Ian Gary. And maybe that's because he knew it was a 3-round fight rather than a 5-round fight. Or, like I said, maybe Jeff Neal's just not even close to as dangerous as Ian Gary. But yeah, maybe Carlos Prates' next fight is this guy here, Michael Page. That was a master class. Literally a minute into the fight, I'm like, oh, yeah, I picked the wrong guy. Because originally I had Jared Cannonier by like a 29-28. I just thought he was a little bit too strong for him. But MVP was dodging and weaving, piecing and punching up Jared Cannonier like it was nobody's business for the first 2 rounds, dropping him twice, emoting on him, dribbling between the legs, saying, hey, kill a gorilla, calm down for a second, and then going back to piecing him up. At the end of the second round, I was like, oh, maybe MVP's trouble for DDP at 185, but yeah, you do not want to see MVP versus Khamzat Chimaev. You don't want to see that. MVP's such a joy to watch. I felt bad for Jared Cannonier for the first 2 rounds because he wasn't landing anything, and he was just getting destroyed on the feet. And he was made out to look like a fool when the MVP was just dribbling on him and emoting on him. And then he dropped him, and he was like, calm down, Jared, calm down. I don't know what's next for MVP. He seems to want Carlos Prates at 170 in Rio. I think that'd be a great fight, and I'd take MVP in it. But maybe he sticks around at 185 and makes a run at the title. I'm pretty confident that MVP has a shot at anyone at 185, aside from Khamzat, that is, and maybe Fluffy. But man, he looked so good in this fight. Someone who didn't look good at all and kind of embarrassed me was Kai Asakura. Tim Elliott looked like a drunk uncle all fight. He was just throwing shit around, flopping all over the place, and I don't even know what he was doing. And all of a sudden, they get to the ground because Kai Asakura had nothing for his takedowns and just locked him up in a guillotine. And I want to give a bunch of credit to Tim Elliott because if I was in the octagon against him, I'd be like, oh, dude, what are you doing? Get away from me. But I want to know where all the speed and the confidence that Kai Asakura had when he walked into the cage against Alexandre Pantoja. I want to know where that went because he had none of it in this fight. Yeah, there were times when he was beating up Tim Elliott, but man, like it wasn't there at all. Maybe he's never seen anything like Tim Elliott. I haven't. He looked like a drunk uncle flopping all over the place, and obviously it worked. And I guess that's just what crafty vets do. I thought Kai might have had a little bit more defense on him than what he showed. But honestly, it was just a really disappointing fight for Kai Asakura, and I don't know what's next for him. Because if you're losing like that to Tim Elliott... And before I make sure you guys know to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on this, I just want to let you guys know, I'm not a huge fan of Chase the Gooner Hooper, but that's an early stoppage any day of the week. You know there's 2 seconds left in the first round. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. So until the next card, peace out.